Right now on Morning News Now, walking it back. The White House now trying to distance itself from key parts of President Trump's proposal for a U.S. takeover of war-torn Gaza.
Everybody loves it.
The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza.
With the fallout from Washington to the Middle East. A power check for Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency. Federal workers across several agencies rallying against the possibility of more job cuts. And another federal judge blocks the president's bid to restrict birthright citizenship. We're going to bring you the latest. Developing this morning, a messy morning across the East Coast. A winter storm hitting several states with rain, ice, and snow. And it's just getting started. We are tracking the conditions, the dangers, and what to expect where you live. And easy bet. More Americans say they're making wagers on sporting events. So with the Super Bowl now just days away, we're going to break down what's behind the trend and what you should know before you buy in. Prevalence of all these apps, it's become so much easier to do it, but we discussed this week mental health issues are coming with it and all sorts of other issues.
Yeah, and concerns with even high schoolers and stuff getting involved.
Exactly. We'll delve into that. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers.
We begin in both Washington and the Middle East as the White House walks back key parts of President Trump's proposal to take over the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, also under fire, the Trump administration's plans to cut federal aid and the federal workforce. And now we're seeing protests. That's what's on your screen right now. To President Trump's policies growing louder all over the country, from California to Texas to Kentucky and Ohio.
The law is the law, and President Trump needs to obey all parts of that law. And Elon Musk, he may get to be a dictator at Tesla, and he is trying to play dictator here in our nation's capital, but he does not get to ignore the law, and we need to shut down the Musk operation.
Elon Musk's team has been working to shrink the federal workforce, offering widespread buyouts, with the National Security Agency the latest to join the list overnight. According to the Office of Personnel Management, more than 40,000 federal workers have taken the offer, with today being the deadline to accept. But Department of Education officials have warned staff the deals could be rescinded. For more on all these major headlines from Washington to the Middle East, we've got team coverage. We have NBC News White House correspondent Yamiche Alcindor, and we have NBC News correspondent Yasmin Vasugian. She's in Tel Aviv for us. Good morning to both of you. Yamiche, I'll start with you. So there's been a lot of back and forth this week when it comes to DOGE. That's the Department of Government Efficiency, led by Musk, about its mission, its level of access to government systems. Now, the Trump administration has now agreed to some guardrails on this, on Elon Musk's power. What can you tell us, and what's the White House saying about it ultimately?
That's right. Well, there has been a lot of criticism of DOGE and their access to things like the Treasury system. But yesterday, the White House press secretary said that that access is read only. She was also asked about conflicts of interest that might come up because of Elon Musk. And she said that he would recuse himself and essentially step away if there were any conflicts of interest. The other thing that's interesting here is that since Elon Musk has become so close to President Trump, there's been a lot of talk of whether or not he's sort of co-president and whether or not he has more say in things and is having too much influence. But President Trump has said he is not co-president and that he is doing whatever the president is reporting and telling him to do. So it's a very interesting thing that the president is really saying, look, I'm checking Elon Musk and he is only having the authority that I'm giving him.
Yamiche, also the White House trying to walk back the president's just stunning proposal for the U.S. to take control of Gaza. This follows backlash from lawmakers, also leaders all around the world. The plan also rejected by the Palestinian Authority president, who's been a longtime opponent of Hamas. Tell us more. What's the administration saying about this right now?
Well, it's really interesting because White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt, she was sort of walking this back and sounding different, though, than President Trump, who is really doubling down on this and saying that the U.S. is going to have and wants to have control over the Gaza Strip. But let's first play some sound of the White House Press Secretary yesterday when she was asked about putting boots on the ground, U.S. boots on the ground in Gaza. Take a listen.
It's been made very clear to the president that the United States needs to be involved in this rebuilding effort to ensure stability in the region for all people. But that does not mean boots on the ground in Gaza. It does not mean American taxpayers will be funding this effort. It means Donald Trump, who is the best deal maker on the planet, is going to strike a deal with our partners in the region.
Now, President Trump had insinuated that boots on the ground might be a possibility during that press conference with Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister. But he is walking back that part, but not the part about the U.S. wanting to take over the Gaza Strip. Just in the last few minutes, he posted online, I'm going to read part of it to you. He said the Gaza Strip would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting. The Palestinians, like Chuck Schumer, would have been already resettled in a far safer and more beautiful communities with new and modern homes in the region. He went on to say no soldiers by the U.S. would be needed. Stability for the region would reign. So even though he's saying that the U.S. wouldn't be involved in any sort of fighting or conflict on the ground, he is still saying that the U.S. would essentially be taking over authority of the Gaza Strip. And he's been saying he wants to build things that sound to some critics like a resort. Of course, there's a lot of backlash to this, and a lot of people saying that this is simply not something that the United States can actually do, including, of course, leaders in the region.
Yes, and let's bring you in here and talk about some of those leaders. So we saw Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu appear to back Trump's plan when he was right there with him after their meeting this week.
Yeah.
How has this chapter played out in Israel, and has it called into question the Prime Minister's hold on power generally?
The conversation has actually really shifted away from Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu's hold on power. I think since the beginning, since October 7th, and even before that time, the Prime Minister was extremely unpopular, especially in a liberal bastion like Tel Aviv. Since October 7th, especially, his unpopularity has, in fact, grown. There was this thought and this idea, as we had kind of been covering this war for the last year and a half, that once this war ended, that Netanyahu would also lose his position of power. And it was possibly one of the reasons why he was prolonging this war, to prolong his power. Even amongst the family forum here, the families of the hostages that were being held in Gaza, they felt as if Netanyahu was making decisions that were putting the lives of their family members who were being held hostage by Hamas in peril. And now, though, the conversation has shifted away from the release of the hostages and the ceasefire negotiations and more towards corralling behind, really, Prime Minister Bibi Netanyahu, since, of course, the declaration of President Trump making and saying, essentially, that Gazans should leave Gaza. And that is because one of the reasons why Netanyahu was beginning to lose power, and it seemed as if it was more up for grabs, is he was losing the really right wing of his cabinet, right, which he needed to remain in power. And now it seems that right wing is coming back around him because they were against the ceasefire negotiations in the first place and striking that ceasefire deal. But now that they see that there's a possibility that Palestinians could leave Gaza, Netanyahu, it seems, has resecured for this moment, guys, his power.
Michelle Sindor, Yasmin Basugian, thank you both very much for your reporting.
Let's get more analysis on the situation in the Middle East with Hala Rawrit. Hala served 18 years as a career diplomat before resigning from the State Department in April last year over the Biden administration's policy on Israel and Gaza. We're glad to have you with us this morning. So the Israeli government seemed to express some interest in Mr. Trump's proposal for Gaza. Beyond that, though, our allies in Europe, Asia, the Middle East have rejected it. What was your reaction to those initial comments by the president? I mean, has anything like this ever been floated before?
Well, I can tell you as a veteran diplomat, it was shocking, but I did serve under President Trump, so nothing really shocks me that comes out of his administration, I have to admit. But it's illegal. And what your audiences have to understand is that it's tantamount to a declaration of war, because the Palestinians will not leave. This has been the point of this decades and decades long conflict in the region, that the Palestinians claim their land. They refuse to leave. They survived a year and a half almost of bombardment, of starvation, and they don't want to leave their homeland. His claim of forcible removal is tantamount as well to ethnic cleansing, to land theft, and it's obviously a violation of international law. And I can tell you I'm still here in the region, in the Middle East, and it is absolutely rejected by every single country in the Middle East. So it's also not a realistic accomplishment whatsoever. But what it has done is caused intense instability, because everyone is in shock, everyone is fearful of what will happen next, and that is not a pathway to peace whatsoever. It's quite the contrary.
We've seen over the past 24 hours, as we were just discussing before we started talking, the White House attempting to walk back the president's Gaza proposal in certain terms, regardless of whether or not this plan ever goes ahead. What kind of consequences do you think just the comments themselves could have on both Gaza and the broader Middle East?
Well, let me tell you, as someone that specialized in the Middle East on behalf of the U.S. State Department, the countries in this region are extremely volatile. A lot of protests have erupted over the last year and a half against these leaders that have been seen as not doing enough to help Palestinian civilians. Now, the fact that they're going to be implicated potentially in the ethnic cleansing of Palestine, it is destabilizing to their leadership as well. And I think if anyone is whispering in the president's ear that knows anything about the Middle East whatsoever, what he is potentially going to do is unleash revolutions across the Arab world that will really, really threaten the legitimacy of leaders in countries like Jordan and Egypt, and even in countries like Morocco, where there have been continuous protests against the monarchy for keeping normalized ties with Israel. So instead of promoting normalization, instead of promoting peace, it's doing the exact opposite. And it is also a threat to U.S. national security, because now we are seen as taking over the war, taking over the genocide as it's seen across the Arab world. And quite frankly, Trump is seen as Netanyahu's lapdog, which has destroyed American credibility, whatever was left of it.
Hala, we're tight on time here, but real quick, what would you like to see the U.S. do right now in this moment?
Honestly, as an American diplomat, it's very simple. Follow U.S. law and follow international law. Follow laws like Leahy vetting, Arms Export Control Act, limit arms to Israel based on that, and follow international law, which states that Palestinians have a right to self-determination, again, based on international law. That is the only solution to peace. As long as there continues to be an illegal occupation, there's going to be a vicious cycle of violence. The only pathway is diplomacy and is administering international law. That's it. It's not that difficult, but it requires negotiation, and it requires policies that are not imperialistic, but rather value human dignity.
All right. Hala Rarit, we really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, President Trump's attempt to quickly shake up the federal government has resulted in employees of one key agency being placed on leave and CIA employees now being offered that buyout. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake has more.
President Trump's latest move in his campaign pledge to slash the size of the federal government. All employees at the U.S. Agency for International Development, which distributes foreign aid, receiving this email saying most staff will be placed on administrative leave at noon Friday.
Hey, ho, ho, Elon Musk has got to go!
Democrats protesting the cuts quarterbacked by Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency.
We don't pledge allegiance to Elon Musk.
We are here to fight back. No one elected Elon Musk to nothing.
While Republicans defending Musk.
USAID has got to actually serve the interests of American foreign policy. It ought to be to promote the interests and well-being of the American people, not some left-wing woke agenda.
Musk posting Democrats' quote hysterical reactions are how you know that DOGE is doing work that really matters. This is the one shot the American people have to defeat bureaucracy. In another cost-cutting move, the Trump administration now offering buyouts to most employees at the CIA and other intel agencies. More than 40,000 federal employees so far have already accepted an earlier buyout offer, according to a source familiar.
From now on, women's sports will be only for women.
And this afternoon, the president signing a new executive order banning transgender women from competing in women's sports and withholding funding from schools that don't comply.
We will defend the proud tradition of female athletes, and we will not allow men to beat up, injure, and cheat our women and our girls.
The Human Rights Campaign responding, quote, "This order could expose young people to harassment and discrimination."
Our thanks to Garrett Haig for that report. Well, that order banning trans women from women's sports is the fourth order directly targeting transgender people the president has signed since he took office on January 20th.
Now to what some lawmakers are calling a disastrous national security development. Members of the U.S. intelligence community are raising concerns after the CIA sent an unclassified email with a list of recently hired employees to the White House.
The CIA says it was just complying, with President Trump's executive order, which asked for the list as part of information gathering in their mission to shrink the federal workforce. But the move has alarmed former intelligence officials and lawmakers who worry that America's adversaries could try to exploit it.
These are people who in many instances will have spent, years in training and arguably years in getting security clearances. So just an absolute unnecessary counterintelligence risk was assumed today.
A CIA spokesperson tells NBC News the CIA became the first major national security agency to offer buyouts to its entire workforce on Tuesday.
NBC News national security reporter Dan DeLuce has been covering this story, joins us now. So, Dan, what more do we know about this list the CIA shared with the White House, and why was it sent in an unclassified email?
Joe, it's just extraordinary. The explanation they're giving is that they had this deadline to meet, like all federal agencies, to provide a list of all the recently hired employees from about the last 2 years. And they didn't have they say there was not a classified way to send it to the Office of Personnel Management, which had a lot of lawmakers scratching their heads, asking how is it possible that there isn't a way to, securely provide that information. So instead, they chose to send it this list with first names and the initials of people's last names. That was their way of trying to protect people's identities. But of course, you have all this criticism now saying any foreign intelligence service really worth its weight is going to be able to figure out using public data and other records who these people might be, and even their addresses, using credit card records and so on. So it's really a tremendous security breach here, and it could affect people's careers and even their safety.
Dan, this kind of information is typically kept classified, right, for a reason. So what are the potential consequences of a list like this being out there unredacted? How serious is it for the individuals, for the employees listed?
It will depend on the employee, of course. Some of these people are not necessarily going to be going abroad and, conducting covert operations or being case officers. They might be at a desk as some kind of analyst. However, even then, they might have very sensitive contacts in their movements and in their travels. Ultimately, it puts people's lives in danger. That's what former intelligence officers say. And, you have to go back to the 1970s when lists of CIA employees were put out there by opponents of the CIA, and there was tremendous risk there, and actually people lost their lives. So it's no joke. It's very serious. The question is, who did this? And the speculation is, was it possibly someone in the Trump transition team who doesn't have kind of as much experience with handling, sensitive or classified information? It seems possible but unlikely that a CIA staff employee would have done something like this, because it would sort of go against their training.
Dan, on top of all this, we know on Tuesday the CIA offered employees 8 months of pay in exchange for quitting their jobs. We know the Trump administration is trying to take these steps to reduce the workforce across all 18 intelligence agencies. These are obviously important jobs. They're not easily replaced. I mean, how could this kind of paring down just impact national security broadly?
This is unprecedented, really, Joe. We've never seen a situation where an administration just writes a letter to everyone in the CIA or other intelligence agencies and says, you can leave and get 8 months' pay, take it or leave it, without really looking carefully at who does what. Right now, they're going to limit some of this. Some people are not eligible if they have very, very sensitive jobs, but it does run the risk that you lose talent and skill. And people in that agency, they go through years of training. These are not necessarily people that can be easily replaced. So it raises a lot of questions about what the impact will be.
Dan DeLuce, Dan, appreciate your reporting on this. Thank you so much.
Well, a federal judge in Maryland issued a nationwide hold on the president's attempt to block birthright citizenship in the U.S. by executive order. This happened yesterday, blocking it indefinitely as the case makes its way through the courts. In total, 22 states, as well as some organizations, have now sued to stop Trump's move.
This is the second judge to block Mr. Trump's order to restrict birthright citizenship. 2 weeks ago, a federal judge in Seattle issued a temporary restraining order for 14 days. Now, that same judge is set to hear arguments in favor of blocking the order later today.
NBC News legal analyst Danny Savalos joins us now with more on this. Danny, good morning. So let's start there in Seattle. So this particular thing that's happening there, because there's a lot of moving parts in other courts, but a judge could issue a preliminary injunction that would indefinitely block this order, but it also gives the Trump administration the opportunity to appeal. No matter what happens, do you see something like this headed to the Supreme Court?
Of course. This is a classic case of every single one of these decisions being essentially an exhibition game. It doesn't count towards the record because when you have pure legal issues, and here you have purely constitutional issues, each court, each appellate court is going to look at it what we call de novo, with fresh eyes. They're not really going to give that much deference to the lower court. So once we get up to the Supreme Court, it's a whole new ball game, and really none of the decisions, even the district court judge who called it blatantly unconstitutional, that judge may be right. But the Supreme Court is not bound by that on these purely constitutional issues of law. So while all of these decisions leading up to the Supreme Court are certainly interesting, the real game, the Super Bowl of birthright citizenship, is not this Sunday. It's at the Supreme Court when this case arrives there, and it almost certainly will arrive there.
There's a lot for people to keep track of with all these different cases going on. What should people focus on right now? And I mean, I guess I'm not a lawyer. I look at it and go, the Constitution's pretty clear on this. You have to amend the Constitution if you want to make this change. Is there a different argument?
So I'll put on my against birthright citizenship hat here, because you're right. For hundreds of years, we've assumed that there was a thing called birthright citizenship. And it wasn't until the 90s that the Republican Party started putting in their platform that they wanted an amendment to the Constitution to end birthright citizenship. Now, that's a different issue. The Constitution can be amended, and you could get rid of birthright citizenship that way. The question is, can Congress do it? And really, more specifically, can the president do it by executive order? And the argument essentially goes back to the idea that the 14th Amendment, which gave birthright citizenship, contains the language, anyone born here and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. So what do those words mean? Opponents of birthright citizenship argue that, hey, we exclude the children of ambassadors. We exclude the children of invading armies. We haven't had an invading army here for a long time. But if the British were to return with their muskets and have children here, the soldiers, we would say, well, those are probably not citizens. It's hard for us to imagine because we've been so safe for hundreds of years. But that is among several of the arguments. But if you were a betting person, and I know you're not, Joe, but if you were, I would bet on birthright citizenship surviving, for no other reason than we've had it for hundreds of years, and there's a very clear interpretation of the Constitution that could lead to that conclusion.
Also, Danny, separately, I want to ask you something that Garrett Hake was just reporting on a little bit ago for us. So this is this executive order to ban transgender women and girls from competing in female sports. Specifically, though, also bans trans women from competing in the 2028 Summer Olympics that will be happening there in Los Angeles. Walk us through legal challenges that could face and the implications here.
The executive order cites Title IX, which bans discrimination in educational arenas. It's a parallel of Title VII, which bans discrimination in employment. And the Supreme Court held in 2020, in a case called Bostock, that discrimination extends to things like gender identity. Now, that's the employment context. We're talking about the education context, but courts do interpret those rulings similarly. So it's ironic that the executive order says this is based on Title IX, and yet it may be Title IX itself that renders this executive order unlawful.
And for those who don't know, Neil Gorsuch, a very conservative justice, is the one who wrote the opinion that said you can't discriminate based on this.
Wow, are you sure you're not a lawyer, Joe?
It's an interesting fact. It surprised a lot of people.
Yeah, very good.
Danny Savalos, thank you very much.
All right, President Trump's nominee for Attorney General Pam Bondi was sworn in as the nation's top law enforcement officer yesterday after a Senate vote that was mostly along party lines. Bondi is the former Florida Attorney General and represented President Trump during his first impeachment trial. She spoke after being sworn in the Oval Office.
I will restore integrity to the Justice Department, and I will fight violent crime throughout this country and throughout this world and make America safe again.
Within hours of taking her oath, Bondi ordered a review of the federal investigations that were conducted against President Trump. She also called for the creation of what she calls a weaponization working group to look into the work of former special counsel Jack Smith.
After an intense 12-hour manhunt, police in Ohio say they've made an arrest in connection with a deadly workplace shooting at a warehouse near Columbus. One person was killed, 5 others injured in the shooting at a cosmetics company Tuesday night. NBC News correspondent Maggie Vespa has more.
A 12-hour manhunt for Bruce Reginald Foster III, the employee who authorities say unleashed a deadly targeted attack inside this Ohio cosmetics plant, ending with a dramatic arrest near Ohio State's campus.
I'm strongly armed, 8025 Snowstone Road. I'm going to bleed out, please.
Newly released 911 calls appearing to be from victims, detailing the horror.
I've been shot on my neck, and my one body is on the floor. But I took the gun away from the guy. My body is just shot on the floor. He's down on the floor.
Okay, is he breathing?
I don't know. I've been shot. I'm putting pressure on my neck. I can't breathe too. Come on, do it fast.
5 people were hurt, 1 killed. Authorities not releasing names and confirming they recovered a handgun at the scene. They say Foster had been on shift for hours before opening fire. His motive still unclear.
Do you think he targeted those 6 people, or do you think they were just around when he started shooting?
I think we're beginning to get a picture of that. We need to go through and find out, like, where's his workstation compared to the other people's.
Investigators say Foster fled using a ride-share service. The manhunt lasting through the morning. U.S. Marshals and other agencies tracking him down more than 20 miles away at this apartment complex near Ohio State University's campus. Court documents show Foster was arrested on 1 count of aggravated murder, with authorities recommending a $20 million bond.
Maggie Vespa, thank you so much. This morning, officials across the country are warning Americans to be careful on the roads. A fast-moving winter storm expected to dump snow, sleet, and freezing rain on at least 17 states. The storm is causing school closures across the Northeast. Overnight, Pennsylvania banned commercial vehicles from several of its major interstates as part of the state braces for an ice storm. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa is in White Plains, New York, where public schools been delayed by 2 hours from opening because of the dangerous driving conditions. Emily, good morning. Tell us, what's it like there now? Just how bad is it expected to get?
Hey there, Joe. Well, this is the wintry mix that officials are concerned could turn roadways into ice rinks right around rush hour time. You might be able to hear it and then see it against the contrast of my gloves, those little pieces of ice coming down and icing over roadways and sidewalks. Up to 1/2 inch could accumulate in pockets of the Northeast, according to forecasters, including in central Pennsylvania, where they are under a rare ice warning. That's where, as you mentioned, officials have banned commercial vehicle transit on several major interstates. We're also seeing the impacts to travel even at this early hour. The misery map showing pockets of red, especially in the Northeast. More than 500 flight delays so far this morning, more than 500 flight cancellations as well, as we see this fast-moving storm move through. And while it is fast-moving, people should be bracing for a 1-2 punch. More severe weather will be moving in, winter weather over the weekend. Tens of thousands of people, especially in Ohio and West Virginia, waking up without power because you think about it, the weight of the ice on tree limbs and power lines knocking that down. So a lot of power companies at the ready to respond to that. Officials warning people as they head out the door to be careful on those roads, guys.
Yeah, and that video reminding us those overpasses are especially dangerous right now. Emily, thank you so much. Stay safe. Let's stick with weather. Check in with meteorologist Denise Isaac. She's tracking what's ahead for this winter storm in her Morning News Now forecast. Denise, good morning.
Good morning, Joe. Yes, we do have at least 103 million people affected by this system. Altoona, Pennsylvania is under that ice storm warning. Cumberland, Maryland as well, while places from Detroit all the way into Maine are under at least some sort of winter weather alert or advisory. We do have snow falling right now in New York that will transition over to ice in just a matter of minutes. Philadelphia, Williamsport, York, Pennsylvania tracking some of that freezing rain and sleet as well, while Richmond, it's downpours. Charleston, West Virginia, heavy rain as well, where earlier today they're under a flash flood emergency because areas of I-64 were completely underwater. And here's a cold front moving through Kentucky that's spawning some tornadoes along this line, along with a lot of lightning. And there's a tornado watch in place until 10 a.m. Central Time. So this area of low pressure will continue to push towards the northeast today, bringing the possibility for snow, ice, all the way into places like Boston, and then a few strong storms possible in the Tennessee River Valley later on this afternoon and evening. As far as ice accumulation, it will continue to impact the morning drive, so please be careful out there as freezing rain and sleet will continue to make these dangerous conditions on the roads. Snowfall amounts anywhere between 2 to 3 inches in Boston, a little bit more towards the higher terrain. Now we switch to the west. We travel around 3,000 miles, where in California, a new system is impacting the area, central California, mostly with heavy rain and snow. This storm system will move inland tomorrow, bringing snow across the northern Rockies from Montana to Nevada, while California gets a break. As far as temperatures, still bitterly cold in the north, while it's warm down south. Austin today, 82 degrees, 77 in New Orleans, where they're getting ready for the Super Bowl. Tomorrow, New Orleans, close to 80 degrees, Del Rio, 88. But this warmth won't last long because by next week, we're tracking temperatures in the 40s. So Memphis, Saturday, Sunday, 70s. But by Monday, Joe, only highs in the upper 40s.
All right.
Back
Thank you so much, Denise. Appreciate it. Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, corporate controversy. Another tech titan scaling back on its diversity policies. The move by Google that's renewing the debate over DEI. Up first after the break, a popular AI startup under scrutiny. Why experts are sounding the alarm on DeepSeek. Next. We're back now with a closer look at the artificial intelligence software that is raising concerns all around the globe. We're talking about the Chinese startup DeepSeek. This week, Australia became the latest country to ban the app over fears it could pose a security risk. Now there are mounting questions over how much the Chinese government is censoring this new technology. NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer has more from Beijing.
It is the Chinese app taking the world by storm. From Wall Street to Washington, DeepSeek is seen as a disruptor to the tech world order.
The release of DeepSeek AI from a Chinese company should be a wake-up call.
Here in China, the AI-powered chatbot is being hailed as a symbol of Chinese innovation.
Oh, God.
That's narrowing the artificial intelligence gap with U.S. tech giants, despite a ban on selling high-powered chips to China.
That is probably one of the bigger, longer-term surprises, where Chinese companies are no longer takers of open source, they're also makers of open source.
But for all the talk of capabilities at a low cost, it's no secret the DeepSeek experience comes with Chinese censorship and controls.
Using China's internet is like navigating this whole other space where some websites and platforms are blocked and the censors are watching. DeepSeek is like this window into how information is shaped here.
This is what it looks like here in China. If I ask DeepSeek general questions about Taiwan or Xi Jinping, the chatbot is dismissive and says, sorry, I'm not sure how to approach this type of question yet. But watch how it censors itself in real time. A question about the 2022 white paper protests over China's COVID restrictions returned a lot about how and why they started and the police crackdown, even calling it a rare moment of collective resistance. Then DeepSeek did a rethink and deleted the answer. When I asked if China censors its internet, DeepSeek started strong on the Great Firewall and blocking sensitive topics like Taiwan, Tibet, and Tiananmen Square before stopping mid-sentence. DeepSeek has not responded to a request for comment, but that the bot takes certain views on topics deemed sensitive in China is stoking concerns about security, free speech, and shifting narratives.
People have such a blinkered view of China outside of China that they don't understand just how grossly censored DeepSeek is. and how much DeepSeek amplifies Chinese propaganda.
There are security concerns, too, over data leaks and worries that what DeepSeek is collecting on American users, including chat histories, IP addresses, and keystrokes, according to its privacy policy, could be accessed by China's authorities. Government offices in Taiwan have prohibited using the AI tool, and so have parts of the U.S. government, like the U.S. Navy saying it's due to potential security and ethical concerns. For now, DeepSeek's low-profile founder, Liang Wangfeng, is becoming something of a folk hero here. All over Chinese social media, there are videos showing how his home village, which is far from China's booming tech cities, is now a tourist attraction. Even the SWAT team was deployed to control traffic. Liang Wangfeng rarely does interviews, but told Chinese state media last year that China's AI cannot remain a follower forever. Most experts believe the U.S. is still ahead in the AI race, at least so far. But with DeepSeek ranking as one of the most downloaded apps on American phones these days, China may not be far behind. Janice Mackey-Freyer, NBC News, Beijing.
More international headlines. New details are coming to light in the investigation into Sweden's deadliest mass shooting. NBC's Raf Sanchez joins us with that and other world news. Raf, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Swedish police say they're still investigating the motives behind the worst mass shooting in the country's history. A gunman opened fire at an adult education center, killing 10 people before taking his own life, police say. Swedish media is reporting the shooter was a former student at the school, but investigators say he had no known links to gangs or terrorism. In Bolivia, at least 100 families have been affected by severe flooding. A stream overflowed following hours of unusually heavy rainfall. Rescue teams were deployed and around 30 families have been relocated to temporary shelters. The government says it's monitoring the situation and providing assistance. And finally, the NFL is going down under. The LA Rams have announced plans for the first ever NFL game in Australia, set to take place in Melbourne in 2026. The exact date of the match is still TBD, and so is the opposing team. We assume it's going to be a football team, but Joe, it could be kind of interesting if they just put the LA Rams up against an Australian rugby team. Let them kind of figure out the rules as they go.
Make it up as they go. I like that. All right, Raf, thanks so much. Coming up, a stunning twist in the death of a woman ruled a suicide more than a decade ago.
If a person has no pulse, they are not going to self-inflict or stab themselves, period.
Well, the medical examiner in the case says he's changing his ruling. This is Morning News. We're back with a major development in one couple's ongoing fight for answers 14 years after their daughter's death. 27-year-old Ellen Greenberg was found dead in her kitchen in 2011 with 20 stab wounds to her chest and the back of her head. The medical examiner said she died by suicide. Now he's changing his opinion. NBC News correspondent Stephen Romo explains why.
More than a decade after Ellen Greenberg was found dead in her apartment, her family says the justice system has finally made a step in the right direction.
It's monumental. For 14 years, we've been dealing with the suicide rate.
In 2011, the 27-year-old first-grade teacher was found dead by her fiancé with more than 20 stab wounds. Her death ruled a suicide by a Philadelphia medical examiner at the time. But her parents, Sandy and Josh Greenberg, never believed she took her own life, taking the medical examiner and the city to court.
I've lost count of all the amount of monies and efforts and emotions that we've been working at to try to clear our daughter's name.
After 14 years of the Greenbergs fighting and on the brink of the Greenbergs' civil case heading to trial, a reversal. Medical examiner Marlon Osborne, seen here in a deposition for the case, now changing his professional opinion of Ellen's death in a letter filed on Friday and obtained by NBC Philadelphia. Citing new information, including whether Ellen's fiancé was witnessed entering the apartment before placing the 911 call. And the findings from a state-hired pathologist seen here in a deposition for the case.
And what's significant here is that there's no hemorrhage.
And in your experience, no hemorrhage
can equate to the person having been deceased at the time of the administration of the trauma.
Yeah, I mean, in general, no hemorrhage means no pulse.
If a person has no pulse, they are not going to self-inflict or stab themselves, period.
Now, attorneys for the Greenbergs say the Philadelphia Medical Examiner's Office will reopen and reinvestigate Ellen Greenberg's manner of death.
So hopefully that'll be a new investigation. All the information that we've acquired over the years will be presented, and I don't see any reason why they wouldn't reach the same result that Dr. Osborne gave.
The city of Philadelphia telling NBC News the terms of the settlement include an independent review of the autopsy file and an express waiver of any claims that might be brought as a result of that process. The criminal investigation into Greenberg's death remains inactive but open, according to the Chester County District Attorney. In a statement released last November, they note there is no statute of limitations for criminal homicide in Pennsylvania, and because investigations can take new directions, we are not closing the case. A grieving family now one step closer to closure.
I hope today we made Ellen proud of us, because we certainly were very proud of her as her parents.
Stephen Romo, NBC News.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Angela Senadella. Angela, good morning. So as we heard there in Stephen's piece, the medical examiner on the case back then, Dr. Marlon Osborne, amended his original position on Greenberg's death in a letter filed on Friday, obtained by NBC Philadelphia. He writes in part, "It is my professional opinion Ellen's manner of death should be ruled as something other than suicide." Talk more about just the significance of a statement like this so many years later and what it means for the case.
Good morning, Joe. So, yeah, amendments like this are not uncommon, and they tend to happen when there's new evidence or just something new that happened that changed the mind of the medical examiner. Now, in a case like this, it is just extremely significant given the extraordinary amount of time from the death, and just that it's not necessarily that clear that really new evidence has come to light given what was accessible to the prosecutors and law enforcement at the time of the investigation. But the impact of this is huge because changing the cause of death from suicide to homicide then does really open the door to a greater criminal investigation, and it allows law enforcement and the district attorney to continue to pursue this. And I do want to just note, though, that really the decision to move forward in an investigation doesn't hinge on the medical examiner's report himself. So it could have been possible at the time that even with the designation of suicide, that law enforcement or the DA could have still continued to pursue this, but it appears they did not, Joe.
Yeah, and that brings us to the prosecutor right now, the Chester County DA's office, saying, as we heard there, the case remains inactive but open. Explain what that means.
Yeah, so that means that they're really just waiting for any additional information, investigation, evidence to move this and to move the needle, to pursue whether or not they can continue to examine the cause of death and to examine anything different. And so inactive just means that it's unsolved at this point, that there are no new leads right in front of them. But the fact that it's open means that the door is not closed, that they are waiting for any new evidence. And it appears here that because the family themselves have come forth and done so much investigation outside of what the DA and law enforcement did, that new evidence couldn't itself be enough to reopen this and possibly turn it into an active investigation.
Yeah, and what does this development, also just these settlements, mean for the family that's been fighting so hard for more than a decade?
Right. So this is extraordinary. I mean, certainly, as we've heard, it would bring a small amount of emotional closure moving forward, of them now realizing that other people in the city have validated what they have known all along, which is that they believe that their daughter was a victim and not of suicide, but of homicide. It also could open the door to pursue wrongful death civil lawsuits. Having a suicide designation tends to close that door, whether homicide designation could open that.
All right. Angela, thank you so much. Appreciate it. We did mention suicide in that segment, so we want to note if you or anyone you know is struggling, you can call or text the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline at 988. Coming up, buying in. With the Super Bowl now just days away, more Americans say they're placing bets on sporting events. We're going to break down the trend next on Morning News Now. Welcome back. With the Super Bowl just a few days away, many fans have their eyes on the prize. And these days, the word prize has been redefined. When it comes to sports betting, the Super Bowl is the biggest event of the year in the U.S. In a recent survey, NerdWallet found that 1 in 5 Americans say they placed a bet on sports in the last 12 months. They also found Americans who place sports bets spent an average of more than $3,200 in a year. More on this, let's bring in Elizabeth Ayola. She is a writer at NerdWallet. Elizabeth, good to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. So this survey also found, a 67% increase in Americans who place sports bets compared with the same survey just 1 year earlier. It seems to me it would be because it's becoming much easier because so many more states are passing this. I mean, talk about why we're seeing this rise here.
Yeah, so we may be seeing this rise because, as you rightfully said, legalization of sports betting in some states has risen. So as of 2025, 38 states and the District of Columbia have legalized sports betting. So this may have consumers very excited because our survey also found that many people see this as a way to earn extra income. And that's one of the leading reasons that people are doing sports betting.
We see so many ads nowadays, and it's just so much easier to do on your phones. What else did your survey find when it comes to sports betting and the issue of debt?
Yeah, so some are actually taking on debt to gamble. So our survey found that 1 in 7 sports bettors, or 14%, say that they've gone into debt to gamble. And interestingly, close to a third of sports bettors view gambling also as an investment.
So obviously there are some major financial consequences, especially if you do lose. What are the things people can do to just stay on top of their finances when betting?
Yeah, so inherently, there is nothing wrong with betting. We all have our hobbies. Some cost money and some don't. But I think the most important thing for consumers to remember is their financial snapshot and health before betting. So what does that mean? You should think about what your income, expenses, assets, and debt is. And by understanding where you are financially, you can see how much you can afford to bet. And that takes me into a second point, which is the importance of budgeting for betting. So you should look at your income again and your expenses and make sure that you're not pulling out of your core income to bet. So that betting money should ideally come out of your discretionary income. And at NerdWallet, we like to look at the 50-30-20 budget, and the 30% bucket is for wants, 50% for needs, and 20% for debt and saving. So that money ideally should come out of the wants bucket.
Such important advice there. You can't spend the money you need to use for rent or food or those types of things if you're going to do this. Elizabeth, Thanks for your advice this morning. Appreciate it. Let's get to some more money news. Google, now the latest company, rolling back its diversity initiatives. CNBC's Silvana now has that and some other money news. Silvana, good morning.
Hey, Joe, good morning to you. Yes, so Google is scrapping its diversity targets, citing recent court decisions and executive orders by President Trump. In a company memo, Google's chief people officer says, quote, in the future, we will no longer have aspirational goals, end quote, when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion. Google is the latest big company to drop diversity targets following similar moves by McDonald's, by Meta, Target, and Walmart. OpenAI is set to join the ranks of Budweiser, Doritos, and Uber Eats and shelling out millions of dollars to get 30 seconds of primetime exposure during the Super Bowl. The Wall Street Journal reporting the maker of ChatGPT is expected to air its first TV commercial during the game on Sunday. It's the company's biggest advertising push so far. Google, Microsoft, and Anthropic promoted their AI products and ads during last year's Super Bowl. And more than 80% of adults say they spend money on at least one common financial vice: alcohol, lottery tickets, casino games, cigarettes or e-cigarettes, sports betting, and recreational marijuana. A new Bankrate survey also finds half typically spend money on one of these at least once a month, and a third do so at least once a week. While many people do use cash to pay for these vices, about 10% are going into debt to do so, Joe. And we were just talking about betting, and
we're just hitting all the vices here during this block right now. The Super Bowl makes us think of all these things,
Great
apparently.
morning television.
All right, thanks, Silvana.
Coming up, a global superstar shaking up the dance world.
When we return, we're going to show you how Bad Bunny has inspired a new generation of salsa dancers. So take a beat. Come right back. You're watching Morning News Now. Finally this hour, global superstar Bad Bunny's latest album is dominating the charts. It's also creating a salsa revival. NBC News correspondent Antonia Hilton went to a Latin dance studio here in New York, where she found fans of the artist eager to learn a few moves.
In early January, Brooklyn salsa instructor and studio owner Will Nieves noticed a lot of newcomers packing into his Salsa 101 classes. Turns out many were inspired by one man, Bad Bunny.
When you compare your beginner classes, pre-album dropping, post-album dropping, what's it looking like?
Big difference. We were always pretty busy, 30 to 40, but some of these new classes are like 60, 70.
For years, Bad Bunny, whose real name is Benito Antonio Martinez Ocasio, has been at the top of his game, popularizing Spanish rap and hip-hop globally. But his latest album, Debí Tirar Más Fotos, explores genres like salsa and jíbaro. It's dominating the charts, inspiring TikTok dance challenges, and bringing generations together. Will showed me the basics of the Puerto Rican variation on salsa. One song has really struck a chord, Baile Inolvidable.
When his music plays on these speakers, what do you see happen in the room?
Oh my God, I hear clapping, cheering.
It channels all sorts of emotions in me, from sadness to happiness.
Will says after everything his island has been through, from Hurricane Maria to massive protests, he believes Bad Bunny is sending the world a message.
I think he's saying that Puerto Ricans are here and that Puerto Rico's not dying. We're going to rebuild and grow even bigger.
He just hopes we continue to listen and to dance. Antonia Hilton, NBC News, New York.
If I had any rhythm, I would give that a shot. All right, that does it for this hour of Morning News Now. The news continues right now.
Good Thursday morning. Thanks for joining us. I'm Savannah Sellers. Right now on Morning News Now, more morning commute madness from Mother Nature this morning. It's bringing a dangerous blast of winter to millions across the Midwest. And yes, if you can believe it, snow is even spotted right here in New York. I'm excited. We've got your full forecast with what you can expect when you head out the door. Changing course this morning after some fierce bipartisan backlash, the Trump administration is scrambling to walk back the president's shocking proposal for a U.S. takeover of Gaza. How the White House responded to our own Garrett Haake when pressed on its America First agenda. Also this morning, another airline accident, this time unfolding at Seattle SeaTac Airport. A Japan Airlines plane seen clipping the tail of a Delta jet in broad daylight. It comes as federal officials move to shore up safety at D.C.'s Reagan Airport in the wake of America's deadliest aviation tragedy in more than 20 years. And later in the hour, we're taking a quick elevator ride upstairs to 30 Rock's famed Studio 8H for a behind-the-scenes look at what's sure to be one legendary episode of SNL. 50 years in the making. Joe's going to bring us that story, and he'll be with us in just a moment. But we're going to start this hour with a warning from forecasters for millions of Americans over these dangerous driving conditions across parts of the U.S. A fast-moving winter storm is expected to dump snow, sleet, and freezing rain on at least 17 states, forcing parts of the Northeast to close some schools today. NBC News correspondent Emily Ikeda is live in White Plains, New York. She's outside for us doing the hard work. Emily, good morning.
Hey there, Savannah. Good morning to you. I want to show you the consistency of this kind of sleet, wintry mix that we're getting, because it's not the light, fluffy stuff. It's really quite icy. You can see and sometimes even hear as it's falling. And this was what has officials concerned to that roadways could become a whole lot more like ice rinks right around rush hour, with the potential in pockets of the Northeast to see up to a half-inch of ice accumulate. Officials imploring people as they head out the door to be careful. Today, millions waking up to a treacherous morning commute as a blast of winter sweeps across at least 17 states, even roads prepped with brine turning to a sheet of ice.
Right there, do you see that? Yeah.
Sending cars slipping and sliding near Kansas City. This car narrowly avoiding a collision with another vehicle. The dangerous deluge of freezing rain, complete with thunder and lightning, icing over roads across the Midwest and expected to impact major cities like Washington, D.C., Philadelphia, New York, and Boston. Schools in several states closing today as a precaution. Parts of central Pennsylvania under a rare ice storm warning, bracing for up to a half inch of ice.
What is the degree of risk when it comes to freezing rain?
The freezing rain makes the roadway very, very slippery. And unfortunately, people think that they can still drive on it. It's not snow, it is ice. And everybody, including us, will slide on ice.
Overnight, commercial vehicles banned from multiple major interstates across Pennsylvania. On the other coast, residents in the Pacific Northwest are digging out from a week of unrelenting snow, captured on this time lapse with even more on the way.
Oh my gosh.
Rainstorms in Northern California leading to severe flooding and landslides. This man's home destroyed.
Probably about 25 feet of mud just kind of slid into the house and took out the house.
Winter weather not letting up from coast to coast. And we're already seeing some pretty major travel impacts. There have been somewhat around 900 flight delays and 500 flight cancellations. And while this is a fast-moving storm, expect a 1-2 punch. There's more winter weather moving in this weekend, Savannah.
All right, Emily, thanks. Stay warm. Thanks for being out there. Well, our winter storm watch continues. We've now got meteorologist Denise Isaac. She joins us live with the latest here on this wintry mix. Denise, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah. It's been very busy here in the weather department as we are tracking this area of low pressure that's bringing that pretty much 1-2-3 punch. We do have the snow, the freezing rain, the sleet, and also severe weather to the south. So currently it is snowing in Hartford, Connecticut, Worcester, Massachusetts, while it's switching over in New York and Newark. Philadelphia is still seeing at least some freezing rain and rain, but it's Charleston, West Virginia, where we've had pretty much 5 hours of continuous rain, flash flood emergency there. And there's also a tornado watch in south central Kentucky where we could see quick spin-ups. And right now there is a tornado warning on that line. So this area of low pressure will continue to push away later on, still bringing dangerous conditions on the roads until about noontime. After that, we'll start to see the freezing rain pretty much move out. There's still snow towards northern New England, and a few strong storms are possible in the Tennessee River Valley. As far as snowfall amounts, anywhere between 2 to 3 inches possible in Boston, 4 inches in Portland. Now we move west, where we do have another storm system coming in today with heavy rain and snow to central California. Slippery road conditions also expected. This system will move inland and bring more snow towards the northern Rockies, and snow is expected from Montana to Nevada. As far as rainfall amounts out west, anywhere between 1 to 3 inches possible around the Bay Area, the same for the higher terrain. And we're expecting at least southern temperatures to continue to be flirting with record highs because we do have that area of high pressure pushing temperatures in the 80s this weekend. So, Savannah, we are tracking a really warm day for the Super Bowl, but another storm system is expected this weekend to bring more rain, snow, and also severe weather.
Yeah, when I asked for snow, as I always do, because I love the snow here in New York, this isn't exactly the type I meant, but I'll live with it. Denise, thank you very much. Well, this morning, the White House appears to be downplaying President Trump's surprising proposal for the resettlement of Palestinians out of Gaza and for a U.S. takeover of the enclave. The comments drew harsh criticism from around the world. NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake joins us with the latest on this. Hi, Garrett. Good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning to you. And yeah, the White House has spent much of the last 24 hours trying to clean up or clarify those stunning comments from the president Tuesday night that the U.S. would essentially own the Gaza Strip going forward. This as the president himself weighed in this morning on social media, and the backlash continues around the world.
This morning, Trump administration officials trying to walk back key parts of the stunning proposal the president laid out for a U.S. takeover of war-torn Gaza. Secretary of State Marco Rubio now suggesting any U.S. involvement in Gaza would be temporary.
The only thing President Trump has done very generously, in my view, is offer the United States willingness to step in, clear the debris, clean the place up from all the destruction.
But on Tuesday at a news conference with Israel's prime minister, the president clearly saying the U.S. could remain in Gaza indefinitely.
I do see a long-term ownership position, and I see it bringing great stability to that part of the Middle East.
Mr. Trump also did not rule out sending U.S. troops.
If it's necessary, we'll do that.
The White House tried to change course when we asked how that fits with his often stated opposition to U.S. involvement in the Middle East.
Can you explain this reversal and how building and owning Gaza squares with America First foreign policy?
I would reject the premise of your question that this forces the United States to be entangled in conflicts abroad. The president has not committed to putting boots on the ground in Gaza. He has also said that the United States is not going to pay for the rebuilding of Gaza.
This morning, the president himself clarifying, saying Gaza would be turned over to the United States by Israel at the conclusion of fighting, and that no U.S. troops would be needed. Some allies calling it an opportunity to remake the Middle East.
This is a bold, decisive move.
But many Senate Republicans aren't buying it.
I'm not supportive of having the American people pay to rebuild Gaza. I don't think that's our responsibility.
Democrats using even stronger language.
Absolutely dumb, stupid, and illegal.
There's another challenge to the president's plan. He says the 2 million or so Palestinians in Gaza will be resettled elsewhere in the region, but key allies like Jordan and Egypt, along with Saudi Arabia, have all rejected that plan. They say they still support the creation of a Palestinian state that includes Gaza. Savannah?
All right, Garrett, thank you very much. Well, this morning, Elon Musk is leading President Trump's charge to reshape the federal government. The billionaire advisor has gained access to even more government agencies and is promising to clean house. NBC News chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles has the latest from Washington.
Elon Musk is openly bragging about the heavy hand he's taking in his review of federal agencies. It has government workers and Americans that rely on their services worried about what might get cut and when. And Democrats are largely powerless to stop it.
Tremendous potential.
Overnight, the Trump administration pressured to hit the pause button, agreeing to temporarily restrict the access of Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, to the Treasury Department's sprawling payment system.
He's done a great job.
But Treasury is just one part of Musk's plan, which includes changing parts of the government that directly impact millions of Americans. Overnight, the agency in charge of Medicare and Medicaid confirming it's working with DOGE to, they say, find ways to use resources more efficiently, quote, in line with meeting the goals of President Trump. Musk had tweeted of the agency, "This is where the big fraud is happening." And the Trump administration also potentially shaking up the intelligence community, offering buyouts at the National Security Agency and at the CIA, which recently sent an unclassified email with a list of all employees recently hired, including first names and last initials, to comply with the White House's goal of staff reductions, according to a U.S. official.
We've put a lot of people needlessly at risk here.
Republicans arguing Musk's work is merely a necessary review.
I think they're doing right by the American taxpayer.
The most dramatic change so far, the U.S. Agency for International Development, effectively shut down. Yesterday, billionaire Microsoft co-founder Bill Gates heading to the White House to meet with President Trump, later telling Savannah he made the case for foreign humanitarian assistance and USAID.
You know, I know all the development agencies of all the countries, and this is the best of them.
Did they seem receptive? Did the president seem receptive? Did Susie Wiles seem receptive?
I hope so.
With protests nationwide over the early Trump administration policies, Democrats saying their constituents are concerned about Musk.
We need to shut down the Musk operation.
Republicans argue this is Donald Trump making good on his campaign pledge.
He is delivering on his promise made to the American people.
And as tonight's deadline approaches for the federal workers to accept the administration's buyout offer, also called a deferred resignation, we're learning that more than 40,000 have taken the deal. That's according to two sources. But that's far short of the White House's expected goal of 5 to 10% of the federal workforce that they need to take the offer.
All right, Ryan Nobles, thank you so much. Well, the FAA and NTSB investigators are looking into yet another accident involving two aircraft. This time it was in Seattle, where one plane clipped the tail of another. It comes as the FAA is now taking steps to reduce the chances of another helicopter plane accident like the one last week that took the lives of 67 people in Washington, D.C. NBC News senior correspondent Tom Costello is on this story for us, as he has been since the start. Tom, this string of aviation accidents, I mean, it's so concerning. Watching this video in broad daylight, it just makes you wonder, how could that happen?
Yeah, it's very concerning. It's what aviation safety experts have been warning about for years. Close calls at the nation's airports. In the last week, we've had the terrifying crash in Philadelphia, the mid-air crash here in Washington with the horrific loss of life, and an unrelated but serious incident now in Seattle.
Oh, my God.
It happened mid-morning at Seattle's SeaTac Airport. The wing of a Japan Airlines 787 Dreamliner slicing into the tail of a Delta Airlines 737.
You can expect to hold for a little bit here. Japan is blocking the alleyways.
Both airlines say there were no injuries. JAL apologized. The FAA says it happened in an area not under air traffic control. While not classified as a so-called runway incursion, the NTSB and FAA have been working to reduce airport close calls. More than 1,600 incursions at airports last year alone, 7 classified as the most serious. It comes as salvage teams continue to retrieve personal belongings and debris from the American Eagle jetliner that went down in the Potomac River last week. Recovery teams hope to lift the Army Black Hawk from the water today or Friday. All 67 victims have been recovered and identified. The FAA says choppers will no longer be allowed to share the airspace with planes around Reagan Airport at the same time.
And they flew right into the landing path of this airplane.
The new Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, says he's looking at ways to surge more controllers into understaffed facilities and modernize air traffic control with the help of Elon Musk, who posted the DOGE team will help to make rapid safety upgrades to the air traffic control system.
We're going to remake our airspace, and we're going to do it quickly.
Almighty God, we gather here tonight.
Meanwhile, a vigil Wednesday night in Alexandria, Virginia, exactly 1 week since 67 people lost their lives in America's worst aviation disaster in more than 20 years. Also new this morning, the FAA is going to reduce the number of hourly flights allowed into Reagan from 28 down to 26 due to the loss of 2 runways right now during this accident investigation and increased stress on controllers. DCA has been averaging 40-minute delays. The new pacing could increase that delay now to about 50 minutes or so. Savannah?
Tom, also the nation's ATC system, it's often said to be antiquated, right?
Yeah. No, it's 100% true. Listen, they're looking at and they're working with technology that is 20, 30, 40 years old in some cases. You know, the video that we've seen of air traffic controllers using pieces of paper, slips of paper in the tower, yeah, that goes back to the 60s. That is not all they rely on. They do have modern computers up there. But this has been a problem for a long time, and the issue is money, as you would expect. The FAA has for years told Congress we need more money to modernize. Congress has not given them enough. And so this is extremely expensive, and it is not a new problem. It goes back many, many years, Savannah.
All right, Tom Costello, we know you'll stay on it for us. Certainly concerning to so many people. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Much more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, we'll take you a few floors up right here in our own building to SNL's famed Studio 8H for a behind-the-scenes look at the sketch comedy Trailblazer ahead of its 50th year extravaganza. But first, an AI arms race between the U.S. and China that's now sparking national security concerns. I'll dig into that coming up. Welcome back. Right now, President Trump is speaking at the annual National Prayer Breakfast. It's at the Capitol. The event is set to be attended by the Vice President and top members of Congress, including the Speaker of the House. Let's listen in.
That God has a special plan and a glorious mission for America. And that plan is going to happen. It's going to happen. I hope it happens sooner rather than later. It's going to happen. And it's His hand that guides us every single step of the way. And all of you and the things we have to do is to see the defining role that faith and prayer have played in the life of our nation. And you just have to look at this building, and you can look at each other. You can really look at each other. It's defined almost everyone in this room. I think faith has been very strong with the people in this room. Just steps away from here in the Hall of Columns is the statue of John Winthrop, who famously proclaimed that America would stand as a city upon a hill, a light to all nations, with the eyes of all people upon us. Today, almost 400 years after that famous sermon, we see that with the Lord's help, the city stands taller and shines brighter than ever before, or at least it soon will. In that same hall, we also find the statue of the great Roger Williams, who founded the state of Rhode Island, named its capital city Providence, and built the first Baptist church in America. It's Williams that we have to thank for making religious liberty part of the bedrock of American life. And today we must protect the fundamental freedom with absolute devotion. We must stand strong, just like generations of Americans have done on the battlefields all around the world. Feet away from the magnificent rotunda, another statue watches over visitors to the Capitol. George Washington, the founder of our country, often called for Americans to join together in prayer, very often. And more than 2 centuries later, this morning, we heed President Washington's wisdom and follow in his mighty footsteps. He was a strong man and of great religious strength. The stories of legends like Washington, Winthrop, and Williams remind us that without faith in God, there would be no American story. Every citizen should be proud of this exceptional heritage. We have an unbelievable heritage, and we have to use that and make life better for everyone. That's why as we approach the 25th times 10 anniversary, think of that, 250 years we'll be celebrating next year of our country's founding. I have signed an executive order to resume the process of creating a new national park full of statues of the greatest Americans who ever lived. We're going to be honoring our heroes, honoring the greatest people from our country. We're not going to be tearing down, we're going to be building up. It will be called the National Garden of American Heroes. Some of you will be on that soon-to-be hallowed ground. Some of you, let's see, I can pick a few of you right now by looking. Because there's a couple of you right now I can see. Let's see. It's the president's sole opinion. And I've given myself a 25-year period. And then somebody else. By that time, it'll be very, very built up. No, it will be something very special. And I hope that Congress will fully fund this wonderfully unifying project at the first possible opportunity. It's not going to be a lot of money. It's going to be very important, however, so that more of our people can be inspired by the faith and courage of patriots like those who we honor in these halls. One of the incredible Americans whose memory my order will celebrate is also recognized with a statue in the Capitol representing the great state of North Carolina. And that's a man known who everybody loved, Reverend Billy Graham. He was something. My father used to take me to watch the Crusades. He would take me to Yankee Stadium. I remember it so well. I remember it more than I remember any Yankee game, and I've seen a lot of Yankee games. Can you believe it? And Billy didn't have a bat, so, you know, it was pretty good. It was amazing. You'd have 60 or 70,000 people, and they loved him. They loved him. I saw him with Franklin. I don't know if Franklin's here. I just don't know, but I've gotten to know Franklin. He's done a great job with helping on tragedies and problems like in North Carolina, California. He's always the first one there. The work he does is, his father's very proud of him, I can tell you that. But Billy Graham was very special. One floor below us, Reverend Graham's statue stands with an open Bible. The page turned to a letter from the Apostle Paul, which reads, "Let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season we will reap if we do not give up." Never give up. Never, ever give up. You can't. How about me? If I would have given up, I would not be here right now. Who the hell knows where I'd be? it might not be a good place. If it was up to the Democrats, it would not be a good place at all. Never, ever give up. There could be no better message for the leaders gathered here, and you are real leaders. And we must never give up, and we must never grow tired. We must never grow weary, and we always must practice good. As you know, last week, only a few miles from here, our nation witnessed a terrible tragedy when 67 people were killed in a horrible accident near Reagan Airport. As one nation, we take solace in the knowledge that their journey that night did not end in the icy waters of the Potomac, but in the warm embrace of a very loving God. None of us knows exactly when our time on earth will be over. You never know. A truth I confronted a few short months ago when there was an incident that it was not fun. It was not a good thing. But God was watching me. The chances of me being here, my sons are shooters. They're really good shooters, Don and Eric. And they said the chances of missing from that range with that gun are, but Don equated it to a 1-foot putt. That's pretty bad. 2 feet I can see missing, but 1 foot you can't miss. It was the equivalent of a 1-foot putt is what he told me. He said, in fact, he gained some religion. He went up 25%. And if you know him, that's a lot. But he said there had to be somebody that saved you, and I think I know who it is. And he looked up, and I said, "Whoa, Don, you've come a long way." He's a good guy, but my 2 sons just really couldn't believe it. Had I not turned that right turn just at that time, and the audience, 55,000 people standing this way, there were just a few people in the back on the bleachers. There was nobody over there except for my all-time favorite chart in history, a chart on immigration. Immigration saved my life, see? So we're going to be good for immigration, okay? But had I not made that turn, boom, and quickly, it was almost as though a deer bolted. You know, they say the only way you miss when you're a good shot is if it bolts. I bolted. I turned to the right to look at the chart, and I said, wow, what was that? What was that? So you never know, but God did that. I mean, it had to be. The chances of turning, there's no reason to turn to the right. You know, the chart is rarely brought down. I brought it down maybe 20%, and 20% of the time. And it's never on my right, it's always on my left. And it's always at the end of the speech, never the beginning of the speech. And if I was a little more than that 90-degree angle, it would be no good. And if I was a little less, it would be no good. It had to be perfect. The thing went right along the edge. It didn't affect my hair. Can you believe that? Might have touched it, but not where it counts. Not the skin part. But honestly, it's a mirror. It changed something in me. I feel even stronger. I believed in God, but I feel much more strongly about it. Something happened. So, thank you. Thank you. But that event, like the tragedy last week, should remind us all that we have to make the most out of every single day that we have. Who would think that you're in space and 2 things collide? The odds of that happening are so small, even without proper control. We should have had the proper control. We should have had better equipment. We don't. We have obsolete equipment. They were understaffed for whatever reason. I guess the helicopter was high, and we'll find out exactly what happened. But the odds, even if you had nothing, if you had nobody, the odds of that happening are extremely small. It's like, did you ever see, you go to a driving range in golf and you're hitting balls, hundreds of balls, thousands of hours. I never see a ball hit another ball. Balls going up all over the place. You never see them hit. It was amazing that could happen. There was a lot of mistakes made, and it should have never happened. But regardless of that, it's amazing that it happened. And I think that's going to be used for good. I think what is going to happen is we're all going to sit down and do a great computerized system for our control towers, brand new, not pieced together, obsolete like it is land-based, trying to hook up a land-based system to a satellite system. And the first thing that some experts told me when this happened is you can't hook up land to satellites and you can't hook up satellites to land. It doesn't work. We spent billions and billions of dollars trying to renovate an old broken system instead of just saying, cut it loose, and let's spend less money and build a great system done by 2 or 3 companies, very good companies, specialists, that's all it is. They used 39 companies. That means that 39 different hookups have to happen. And I don't know how many people of you are good in terms of all of the kind of things necessary for that, and it's very complex stuff. But when you have 39 different companies working on hooking up, different cities had different people, you need one company with one set of equipment. And there are some countries that have unbelievable air controller systems, and bells would have gone off when that helicopter literally even hit the same height because it traveled a long distance before it hit. It was just wouldn't stop. It was, follow the line. But bells and whistles would have gone off. They have them where it actually could virtually turn the thing around. It would have just never happened if we had the right equipment. And one of the things that's going to be, I'm going to be speaking to John and to Mike and to Chuck and to everybody. We have to get together and just, as a single bill, just pass where we get the best control system. When I land in my plane, privately, I use a system from another country because my captain tells me, I'm landing in New York and I'm using a system. I won't tell you what country, but I use a system from another country because the captain says this thing is so bad, it's so obsolete, and we can't have that. So we're going to have the best system, and a lot of money, but it's not that much money. And it'll happen fast, and it'll be done by total professionals. And when it's done, you're not going to have accidents. It's just they're virtually not possible to have. Each of us is blessed with a precious chance to help lead America to renew our pledges of faith and everything else, and bring us to new heights and create a future of promise for our people and for ourselves. We have the most important people in the country in a true sense here because you're the ones that are going to make the decision. You're the ones that are leading us into so many different things, whether it's the right air control system or the right size military or what to do and what not to do. Most important people. And many of you are very religious. I know so many of you are very religious. And I just think that our country has been so badly hurt. We're very hurt by what COVID did to religion. It really hurt it badly. People couldn't go to church for a long period of time. Even going outside, they were given a hard time. And I'm not blaming anybody for that, but it was very hard to gather. So they start using computers, if that. And when they come back, it's just, a whole new experience they have to get used to. But it is starting to come back. We had a fantastic thing happen yesterday. The Army had the best recruitment numbers that they've had in more than 15 years. They think it could be 25 years, actually. They're going to probably put that out, but more than 15 years just now. And we were worried about it. We were talking about it numerous times that, we don't have people joining our military services. We don't have people joining our police force. We have to cherish our police. It's so dangerous. You open a car and somebody starts shooting. They have blackened windows. You don't even have any idea who's in the car. Oftentimes they have the dark windows, which are not, in theory, supposed to have, but they have them. The door opens and a gun is pointed at your face, and you can't do a thing about it. It's just nothing you're going to do about it. Your friends will take them out. It's happened so many times, but it's such a dangerous thing. We have to cherish these people. So today we join our hearts and prayers and recommitting to putting our country first. We have to put our country first, making America stronger and greater and more exceptional than ever before. And we have to make religion a much more important factor now. We have to make it an important factor. And if we do that, it's going to be, our job is just going to be much easier. It unifies people. It brings people together. Democrats are going to be able to have lunch again and dinner with Republicans. And I remember just as growing up, I'd see, I revered senators and congressmen or something very special, but they were out to dinner all the time. We had an old congressman, maybe some of Cy Halpern from Queens, and he was a friend of my father. But he'd have dinner with, he was a Democrat, he'd have dinner with Republicans, and he'd be out, it wouldn't even make a difference. Today, it's like shocking. And it shouldn't be. You have to get together. We really have to get together. We all know what's right and what's wrong, and there's going to be compromise on both sides. But we have to just do the right thing, and we have to get together. You did it with Marco Rubio. You got everybody who was 99 votes, and the only vote was our VP, who maybe we should have been there just to make it 100. But I think I would have been angered if it was 100. That might be a step too far, right? But no, it was great to see a vote. Pam Bondi had support from Democrats, and some of the others had some pretty good support. So, it's doable. We had a recent bill having to do with a very beautiful young lady who was killed from Georgia. And that bill was very bipartisan. It was a very beautiful thing to watch, actually. And so I think we just have to, if possible, we have to unify. There's big division. I mean, some people want an open border and some people want a closed border. We want it closed and they want it open. And that's a big difference. How do you solve that problem? It's a big difference. Some people want men and women's sports and some people don't. And I was with somebody yesterday who was so upset that the bill was signed where men cannot participate in women's sports. And I said, he's a very smart guy, went to a great school, was a great student, and he actually feels, that should happen. Men should be able to play, meaning transition into women's sports. And you talk to him and it says, I don't understand it. I don't understand how the problem ever got started in the first place. It just seems so simple. But he's a good person and just believes it. He just believes it. Not going to be easy to convince him otherwise. So where is the middle ground? It's hard to have a middle ground. There's two ways. I mean, you can either do it or you can't. But I think a lot of good things are going to happen. A lot of people might be surprised to hear me say that, of all people, but I think a lot of good things are going to happen because our country's got some big headaches, but we have tremendous spirit right now. The spirit is as high as it's been. It was up 49 points this morning. 49 points. It's the biggest increase in the history of whatever the poll was. So the spirit is there. That's a big factor. That's probably the hardest thing to get back, to be honest. The rest is easy. The rest is easy. So I want to just thank you all. I want to congratulate a lot of the new members. I see so many of you that ran great races, David. That was a great race. But so many that ran great races. And on both sides, you ran some incredible races. So it's good to be with you. And God bless everybody. We want to come together, and the happiest, the person, the element, the everything that's going to be happy. People of religion are going to be happy again. And I really believe you can't be happy without religion, without that belief. I really believe it. I just don't see how you can do. So let's bring religion back. Let's bring God back into our lives. Thank you all very much. Thank you very much. Great honor. Thank you.
That was President Trump speaking at the National Prayer Breakfast, an annual event that dates back to the 1950s, starting with President Eisenhower. In it, he touched a deal on his faith, including the attempted assassination on his life last year. Also spoke about the tragedy over the Potomac River last week when an airline jet collided with a helicopter and the importance of faith in that moment.
Yeah, using that moment also to say that we will get a new type of system here in the U.S. If it's up to him, and that he will work to make that something that has bipartisan support. And specifically saying about that assassination attempt that God did that when it came to saving his life. For more, we, in a moment, will be going to senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake, who was in the room for this conversation, but definitely delving into that assassination attempt by actually describing in detail what he saw as essentially God intervening, as he said it. He was pointing to this chart about immigration, really explaining the exact angle that everything happened at. That meant that his life was spared.
And the bipartisan nature of this on display right now. He just shook hands with New York Senator Kirsten Gillibrand. So this is an event that is supposed to stress bipartisanship. The president discussed some of that while talking about the role of religion, talking about COVID. Also taking note that the controversial executive order he signed yesterday banning transgender women from competing in men's sports, and actually acknowledging that there was someone who talked to him who deeply opposed that. Let's bring in Garrett Haake now. Garrett, anything stand out? This was, I guess, typical Trump. He talked a little bit about what his speech was supposed to be, then seemed to go off on some tangents, including about satellites and things like that. What's your takeaway here?
Yeah, I think that's right, Joe. I mean, in situations where he is asked to talk about his faith, he often goes back to surviving the assassination attempt, the first one over this summer. You heard him do that here. In terms of any policy-related news, to me, the big takeaway was essentially him asking Congress to redo the nation's air traffic control system. This is clearly something that's been on his mind since that crash here in Washington last week. Just yesterday, we heard from the Secretary of Transportation on this topic, and Elon Musk suggesting this would be a project for the kind of tech folks that Elon Musk has brought with him into the federal government. But here you hear the president calling on Congress to take on that project. That's obviously no easy task, and probably not a cheap one either. So it'll be interesting to watch if and how that gets done in a Congress that has struggled to pass much of anything for the last several years, but especially now with these really tight Republican majorities.
And Garrett, speaking of that majority, we know the president's set to meet with House Republican leaders after this morning's breakfast. What's on their agenda?
Well, they're still trying to figure out a path forward for this Republican-only, what's called a reconciliation bill that they want to try to pass at some point this year to push the president's priorities on immigration and on taxes specifically. There is a divide between the House and Senate about the best way to get this done. The shortest way to explain it is the House wants to take on one big bill that might take longer to get done, but Senate Republicans are pushing ahead, saying the president needs to get some legislative victories on the board now. This is a very active debate among Republicans right now, and today at the White House, it'll be the House leaders essentially lobbying Trump for their preferred path forward. Senate Republicans are expected to meet with Trump later on Friday, and we're all going to find out together who's winning that argument.
All right, Garrett Haake at the White House. Garrett, thank you so much.
You bet.
Coming up, AI back in the national spotlight this morning.
After the break, we're focusing on DeepSeek. It's a brand new Chinese artificial intelligence app we've been telling you about. Well, it is facing some major national security concerns here in the States. But can it actually stack up to rivals like ChatGPT? Well, we put them both to the test up next. Welcome back. DeepSeek, the Chinese artificial intelligence app that launched just 2 weeks ago, is making headlines worldwide for its speed, its advanced capabilities, and its lower production costs compared to its U.S. competitors, even roiling the market last week. Now, though, the app is facing bans from government agencies here with growing concerns over national security and allegations that it may be sharing user data with China. Breaking news this morning, bipartisan legislation will be introduced to ban it from government devices. With the stakes now higher than ever for the country's leading AI companies, I put DeepSeek head-to-head with its U.S. rival ChatGPT to find out why some think it's the better app.
Australia, South Korea, and Taiwan are the latest countries announcing a ban of the surging AI app DeepSeek. Plus, government bans in the U.S. are also growing, with NASA, the Navy, and Texas state government workers blocked from using the Chinese-owned app, all citing national security concerns.
DeepSeek spells it out right in its privacy policy that they are tracking user keystrokes and they are saving that data on Chinese servers. What does that mean for users?
Where is that data going? Is it to companies we trust? And are those privacy policies reflective of that?
Now, cybersecurity firm Faroot says it's found evidence users' data is going to China with the ability to send that data to state-owned China Mobile, a telecom company already blocked in the U.S. with the Pentagon citing ties to the Chinese military. Still, users don't seem to be scared off, with more than 16 million downloads since its launch. This as OpenAI is investigating whether DeepSeek used its models inappropriately to build a competing app. With so much buzz around DeepSeek, we wanted to use the app ourselves against the U.S.'s most popular AI chatbot, ChatGPT, starting with concerns DeepSeek censors its answers.
Let's see what happens when I ask both DeepSeek and ChatGPT about Chinese leadership. What do you think of President Xi? DeepSeek just started an answer and then immediately said, sorry, that's beyond my current scope. Let's talk about something else. Whereas ChatGPT is giving a detailed answer.
When asked what happened at Tiananmen Square, DeepSeek simply refused to answer.
It's going to generate, and then its rules are going to tell you, hey, nope, you're not supposed to say that. Wipe it.
I asked both to compose an essay of someone they admire.
Okay, they picked the same person. Both DeepSeek and ChatGPT are saying they admire Malala.
The concern is that you've got an account with DeepSeek, which is a Chinese-owned company. Is our data, the data that's all over our phone, all the signals that the phone can get and that app can get, going to the Chinese?
Now, we reached out to DeepSeek about what we saw and potential data collection issues and did not hear back. OpenAI also did not respond to our request for comment on this demonstration. Also, as we were using DeepSeek, the app wouldn't load answers several times throughout the day as its makers are still working out the kinks. Coming up, we are celebrating 50 years of side-splitting, cutting-edge comedy.
SNL celebrates the Big 5-0 this season, so after the break, I'm going to take you a few floors up from our studio here at 30 Rock for a behind-the-scenes look at the show's legendary longtime home, Studio 8H. That's next. Stay with us. This morning, we're celebrating 50 years of Saturday Night Live with a behind-the-scenes look at the show's legendary longtime home, Studio 8H. It is the largest studio here at 30 Rock, and, well, it has been home to the sketch comedy show since it started back in 1975. But the show's history actually goes back nearly a century.
Live from New York, it's Saturday Night!
Across 50 years,
hello, I'm Baba Wawa.
The cast has changed.
The wild and crazy guy.
The home has not. Studio 8H is the longtime launching pad.
Party on, Wade. Oh, party on, Kurt.
For SNL's stars.
It's probably the most famous studio in the country, if not the world.
This is home base, the heart of Studio 8H. As you know, the host will burst through this door, past the band, down the stairs, which Tina Fey says she's almost fallen down a few times, and come to the center right here. What you may not realize is that moments before the cold open, the first sketch of the show, it often happens in this area right here, when the actors utter those 7 iconic words.
Live from New York! Live from New York! Live from New York! It's Saturday night!
Then the opening credits start, and the crew has about 2 minutes to break down that entire set, just in time for the host to triumphantly emerge and deliver the opening monologue.
Stick around, we'll be right back!
To the left of home base is the music stage, which has hosted a sweeping spectrum of performances. Music is in the studio's DNA. Starting in the 1930s, 8H was home to the NBC Symphony Orchestra, conducted by the legendary Arturo Toscanini. At the time, it was the largest radio studio in the world, with more than 1,000 people filling the space. Then in the 50s came television.
We got a chance now. We can have something.
James Dean was here before going east of Eden.
From New York City, it's time to play.
And Betty White played the match game.
Betty, what is your answer?
Car.
Ah, there's the match.
Stars and stars.
Reporting from the NBC News Space Center,
NBC News covered space launches,
liftoff on Apollo 11,
and election nights from 8H.
This election this year is creating banner headlines.
Not to mention a few early mornings for today.
We're actually in 8H this morning.
More than anything, though, the studio is synonymous with Saturday nights. SNL's audience is nearly 400, most watching from above in seats from Yankee Stadium. A perfect perch, says Jim Miller, who wrote the book on SNL.
One of the great things you get to see when you're in Studio 8H watching Saturday Night Live is how quickly they get out of one set and into another. It's precision. There is no margin for error.
When a sketch is done, actors will often have to run off stage for a quick change, which is why they have this cushioning here, along with a sign that says, "Watch your head." Look closely and you'll see someone in marker wrote the word Farley, a reference to Chris Farley, who, legend has it, was known to hit his head here.
Here's you, here's Matt, there's you, there.
One chapter in the history of a place.
Well, isn't that special?
That's a culture cathedral.
50 years ago, cost about $250,000 to renovate Studio 8H for SNL, which would be around $1.4 million today. Seems like a pretty good investment. Yeah. Now, coming up tomorrow, I'm going to take you behind the scenes with SNL's incredible makeup team. It's so much more than makeup. The prosthetics they do are absolutely extraordinary. It's all part of our celebration leading up to SNL's big 50th anniversary special. You can catch that live on February 16th in primetime on NBC and Peacock.
It's really throwing me that it's not on Saturday night.
It is not on Saturday night.
So FYI.
Sunday night.
All right, there'll be more morning news now right after this. Stay with us.
Finally this hour, a school has found a special way to honor a beloved cafeteria worker at the end of her career.
Here's reporter Sam Reed from our NBC News affiliate in Massachusetts.
While the Norfolk County Agriculture High School in Walpole is home to students studying sciences, it was also once home to one of the sweetest,
staff have missed her, students have missed her.
Let me give you a hug. Most caring and compassionate cafeteria workers one may ever meet.
Julie, how are you, honey?
81-year-old Betty Duquette.
Oh.
And everyone has a lot of love for their lunch lady.
I've never quite seen anything like it.
So you can visualize what we're talking about. We asked her to come out of retirement for the day.
Hi, Betty. Mason.
Oh, it's so great to see you.
And just like the superintendent said, what you're witnessing is a woman who is cared for by all, and it's the same in return.
Good to see you, honey. I sincerely love them.
And it's been like that for the 23 years that I've been here, that everybody wants a hug from Betty.
40 years ago, Betty was hired to help in the kitchen.
We're a family here. We're not just an agricultural high school.
And ever since, she's been the heartbeat of the school, making it her mission to let people passing through her line know she cares.
How are you? Good. I just want them to have a good day. I want them to feel good about themselves.
Betty boasts kindness. In fact, a few years ago, the school began giving out an award that bears her name.
She has this uncanny ability to make every single student feel loved and special.
And after learning at the age of 81 she'd be retiring to tend to her own family, they wanted to do something special. The building with the cafeteria, which is adjacent to her actual home, had no name. Lauren Fraser created a petition that garnered nearly 1,000 signatures.
If there was anybody who has had a profound influence on more students at this school, it's Betty.
Her last day was the unveiling of the new name, the Betty Duquette Hall.
To have this building with my name on it, it's just incredible.
To be able to participate in the experience for Betty has been wonderful, very gratifying.
Oh my goodness, here's my little one, Sophia.
Sometimes our value in life isn't always measured in money or status, but the moments we make most meaningful. It's something that Betty's been doing for decades, with everyone in her lunch line.
Anybody who's graduated in the last 40 years, they may not know the superintendent's name. They'll remember some teacher for good or bad. But every one of them, if you ask, is going to remember Betty.
Showing you something good. I'm Sam Reed.
That is something good. That is so sweet. Congratulations to Betty. whose legacy will live on. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.